So we're not going to do introductions because we've got a lot of people here. We're just going to dive right into it. But I'm John Valines. I'm the South Watershed Manager with the Flood District and the project manager for this project that we call MHFD Confluence, which is a web platform to display our data and collect our work requests from you guys this year, among many other things. This has been in the works for a couple of years now. It's a really big, ambitious project for us, and this is the kind of the big rollout to our trusted friends, you guys at the local government level who are going to be working with us to create and implement projects. And that's what Confluence is really meant to do, is to help you better understand the issues in your watersheds and in your jurisdictions and turn those concerns into projects. And then eventually to manage those projects. It's the same system, in a future module that we're going to use when you request a project now. We're going to take that data building block, that foundation that we've created, and then build on it, actually on the same actual thing in the database. We're going to build on that to actually manage the project and then even monitor the project afterwards. So it's really a big change in the way that we're managing work. But right now, the first stage of it that you're going to see today that we've built is just the base kind of platform, the look and feel of it, the mapping system where you can explore the new data that we've created to help you with your work requests, and then the process to actually implement your work requests, to request funding and request projects from us. So it's similar to the ArcGIS Online app that you've used in the past, but it builds on that, provides some additional data, and then, like I said, has some really cool plans for the future to help us manage projects once they get started. So that's all I'm going to say right now in the way of introduction. I'm going to turn it over to Holly, and she's going to take it from here.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry. Go ahead, Holly.
That's all right. Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Pisa, if I haven't met you. So this is, let me get into just the agenda here. So first of all, welcome and thank you for attending today. We've created Confluence really as a tool for all of us. And we're talking about work requests today, which is just one aspect of what MHFD Confluence will have in it. For work requests, it provides additional information to help inform requests, and hopefully you find it to be a user-friendly platform to do that. And please know that we're still working on this and improving this, and bear with us as we roll this out. It's new and it's still a work in progress, and we want your feedback so that we can help, or so that we can continue to make improvements. And there's a way to provide feedback in the platform that we'll show you. So here's the agenda. And I just, it's also, we hope that we acknowledge that there's some additional work involved in learning a new way of doing things. And we hope that although it may take a little bit longer this year, you find it's really helps reduce the time that it takes, and more than that, provides a good tool for collaboration. A lot of you have multiple people that are working on these at the same time, and this will allow you to really have it in front of you and see it. So there's some good benefit there as far as providing resources and a tool for collaboration. And then the ultimate vision building up to that, it will really become a tool that helps us manage projects and work on projects together, and communicate and collaborate throughout the projects that we're working on together. So that's the ultimate vision, to have all the information in one place. Okay, so we'll go through kind of just the timeline of work requests. We're going to hit on some Confluence terminology before we get into the demonstration. Hopefully, you got John's email on signing up, and many of you have tried to do that. If not, no worries. We'll go through that, make sure everyone is in the platform so you can kind of play with it while we're going through the demonstration. We'll do kind of a high-level overview of the platform, and then get into a focused demonstration on specifically how to do work requests. And then we can have some Q&A. And we have the ability, decided not to do this yesterday because there weren't a lot of questions, but we have the ability to do smaller breakout groups in case we want to, in case we do have some good questions and want to work together in smaller groups. Okay, so 2023 work requests. There are 5 types of projects that you'll see in MHFD Confluence. Capital projects, projects that we have a master plan for that increase conveyance or reduce flow and require a local match. Maintenance projects, there's actually 5 subtypes of maintenance projects that you'll see when we get in there. Trash debris management, pretty self-explanatory. Vegetation management, seeding, thinning, weeding, adaptive management, sediment removal, minor repairs. So maybe it's a failing drop structure or other eligible structures that need maintenance, and restoration. So reestablishing natural processes. And then studies, so master plans, and whether they're MDPs or OSPs, and also FADs. And then acquisition. So this is acquisition coming out of our preservation fund. You might have an acquisition as part of a capital project. This is where you're identifying this area that's maybe not related to a capital project, but you'd like to use preservation funds to do an acquisition. And then special projects include education and outreach development, a research project, development of new guidance, data collection efforts, development of new technologies and processes. It's really wide open. And if I didn't mention something there that you're thinking about, go ahead and put it in, and we'll talk and see if it kind of fits our definition of special projects. Those are sometimes location specific, and sometimes they're not specific to a location. It could be a guidance document. So we'll show you how to request a special project that's not location specific in the platform. Okay, really straightforward timeline. Right now, what we're doing today is exploring the platform and getting familiar with it and playing around. You can add fake projects to it. Everything is going to be wiped clean until after this, week, or before we send out the official letter that announces that it's time for work requests. So we're targeting August 5th for that, for receiving that letter. And then that's when you'll come back into the program and really do your work requests. And then we're hoping you submit all of those work requests by September 9th. So this gives you a little over a month. And we hope in that time where you have questions, you reach out to your watershed manager and get the help you need there. I love that I see some watershed managers that attended yesterday and are attending today to make sure that they really know how to help you with the platform. So that's great. Okay. Just briefly, some MHFD Confluence terminology. We're going to be talking about draft projects, which is just a project that you are creating before you submit it, and confirm that that's part of the work request, and then we take a look at it. And you do all that in the draft workspace which you will see, that allows you to see all of the projects you and anyone else in your local government has added, and allows you to, and here's where that collaboration piece comes in, allows you to prioritize those projects together. Okay, you will see some different colored shapes within the mapping interface. And we talk about the red shapes as problems. And a problem area, there's really three types of problem areas. It's either a flood hazard, an issue with stream function, or a watershed change. We're anticipating different hydrology in the future, that kind of thing. Okay, so three types of problems, and it might be a problem the size of one project. It might be the problem the size of 5 projects, but within that problem, there's problem parts that are then orange. And that could be like a undersized culvert, something like that, a constriction of some point, of some kind. And then the components are green, and components are master planned improvements. So you'll see new, well, anything that's proposed in the master plan. Channel improvements, structures, those will be in green. And then active projects, ongoing projects are in yellow. There's one on this screen. You can see an area of Clear Creek that's yellow, and you see a card that to the right that says restoration. That's a restoration project. And so for active projects, you'll see it in the map and on a card. And we've also populated the platform with past projects. And so for those, you'll just see cards. They're not located or turned on in the map interface. Okay, so just another view with some problems, some red, also some green, some master plan improvements. And then on this screen, you see problem cards to the right. So I mentioned the 3 kinds of problems: flood hazard, stream function, and watershed change. It's just another view. Okay, couple things to know before we get into the demonstration. I mentioned this, but again, today we're only testing it out. Work requests will open in a couple weeks, and you will need to actually go through and register again. So this is all practice. You won't see past unfulfilled work requests in Confluence, only what was added to the work plan for future years. And know that there are multiple ways that you can add projects. We know that some of you know what you want before you get in, and you've got it all identified. And some of you are really looking for information that helps you inform your work requests. And so you can explore, and we encourage you to explore the problem areas and components. So Katie will go through this, but you can add projects based on problem area, by component, or ad hoc, meaning maybe there's not a problem area there or a component, but you want to add a project that you know about. There is a project naming convention. I'll show you what that is. And then we ask that you please don't rename any active projects. So the project naming convention is essentially the stream name at location. And for acquisitions, it's just the address. And for special projects, just do your best to describe it. Those are all different. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie Evers, who is our GIS manager.
Hi, thanks, Holly. So we're just going to walk through how to sign up to Confluence just to make sure everyone has access and no trouble signing up. So Holly's going to share the link to our test Confluence site in the chat. And I'll go ahead and share my screen and walk through that a little bit. So once you navigate to the test Confluence link, you're brought to this kind of login page. And if you haven't already logged in, you can click here where it says don't have an account and sign up. And then you'll see a few different choices for the role that you want to register as. You'll want to select local government, and by selecting the local government role, you'll have access to the work request and work plan modules. So you'll just enter your first and last name, your work email, select the organization that you represent, and choose a password, and then click sign up. And when you first click sign up, you'll be brought to you'll be logged into Confluence, but as a guest user, and that's because everyone who signs up needs to be approved. So that's just so that myself and John and other MHFD staff can review who is registering for Confluence and make sure that they've selected the correct role. So John is going to be monitoring our list of users and approving them as people are signing up right now. And a thing to note about that is once you are approved, you will receive an email notification saying that your registration has been approved for Confluence. And then at that time, you'll know that you can access the work requests and work plan modules. And so you'll just need to log out and log back in. Like I mentioned, you're initially signed in as a guest user, so you won't have access to any of those modules. The first time you sign in, I'll just touch, since it's up on my screen, that we have put together a little tutorial splash screen, and that you'll see the arrows just kind of briefly describe some of the basic user interface. There's 3 different screens that you can click next and read about. And then you can also, if you want to get that back, you can click on the question mark here in the top right corner. But with that, I'll open it up for any questions, and John will be monitoring the dashboard to approve users before we dive into more in-depth demo.
Thanks, Katie. I stole the screen. Can everyone see the little list of names here?
Yes.
Okay. So we're just going to sit on this page for a minute. I'll refresh it a few times. So I'm going to approve people as we go, just to give everyone a minute to make sure that you've gone through the sign-up process. And I'm going to check and make sure that everyone is signed up. It's important to click that local government button and then select your organization, because those are the things that give you access to that workspace that's specific to your jurisdiction. So I'm just going to confirm. And if you don't, sometimes it's easy to miss that and just leave it on MHFD staff. If you do, I can change your organization, but we'll have to get you signed up again in the production version in a week or so to make sure that you're in the right workspace. But that's not a problem. This is all just a test environment to practice going through the process. So if anyone has any trouble signing up, now is your chance to raise your hand and ask for a little bit of help while I'm doing this.
Hey, John. I'm on the page and it's just spinning. I don't know. Maybe that's because there's so many people trying to sign up right now, but
I would try just refreshing your browser if it's doing that. Hopefully it's just a temporary thing.
And John, there was a question in the chat of, do we need to re-sign up if the account still works from last year's beta version?
No. If you have already logged into the system before and it says you already have an account, you can use that same login in the test environment.
And,
And it will
and I
probably-
guess maybe to build on that, there will be a different account sign up for the real go live, right?
If you have already signed up and it's telling you that you already have an account, then that account probably already exists on our production environment. So you'll probably not have to log in again or sign up again in a week in that environment either. But if you're signing up for the first time and it's allowing you to do so with your email address in the test version, you'll have to do that same thing in a week's time on our production environment. I'm not going to get into the details of how the databases are set up, but if it says you've already signed up, you're probably good to go in all versions. And if it says you have not, then you'll need to sign up again in a week. And it's a different link. It's actually just confluence.mhfd.org that you're going to go to eventually. That's the live site, but we're not directing people there just yet. Okay, I'm not seeing any other pending user requests. So I'm assuming that means that everyone that's going to sign up has done so. You're also, of course, welcome to do this later. And, reach out to us if you have any issues. All right, so I'm going to give a quick high-level overview of the Confluence platform and kind of the look and feel and the user interface and some of the features. And I'd like for this to be interactive as much as possible. So if people do have questions or just comments or feedback even on what you're seeing, please don't be shy. But I understand it's a lot just seeing it for the first time. So just try to soak up what you can. So this is the main landing page of Confluence that you get to as you log into the system. We call it the map view. And I'm going to expand. There's a navigation bar on the left-hand side where you can see these buttons. There's a little arrow down at the bottom that you can expand, and it'll tell you the name, but the names show up when you hover over the icons. But the page that you land on is what we call the map view. Excuse me. And we've modeled this system after real estate websites like Airbnb and Zillow are good examples. They manage their properties that are on their page in a very similar way that we manage projects and problems. They're things that exist in space and then have some attributes associated with them, just like a house. Think of a project in our system or a problem is kind of like a house on one of those, or a property on one of those websites. So these cards represent, depending on which tab view you're on here, in this case, they represent projects. You can see I've got 115 projects that have returned from my current set of filters, which just like on a real estate website, if you're looking for houses between a certain price range and a certain zip code, right now, by default, it's showing you projects that are capital and maintenance type and that are active. And I can clear those filters. I can clear individually. I can clear all of them. And if I hit reset, it'll go back to that base set of filters. If you click on that filter button, it brings you to a page where you can apply that filter set. And then you can change that you just want to see a certain project type, for instance, or most importantly to you guys is probably going to be which jurisdiction you want to look at. So let's say that you just wanted to see projects in Highlands Ranch. You could click on that and then hit apply, and then just projects that are in Highlands Ranch are returned. And you can apply multiple selections on any of these as well to come up with your view of projects or problems that you want to see. So each of these features, projects and problems, have a detail page, which can be accessed by clicking on this card. And you can also get to it by clicking on the actual feature on the map, and then you'll get a pop-up that returns whatever is kind of in the stack of layers that you clicked on, just like GIS. So in this case, I can see the stream. It's got some information about the stream, Badger Gulch. It's got our trib code, which is kind of an address for the stream, the tributary area, the reach length, and the slope of that stream. And then if you click on the project that I selected, you can see it highlighted in white here. And this Badger Gulch at Ridgegate Parkway project is in Lone Tree. There's no cost data for it. It's a fee in lieu project. It's active. And if we click on See Details, it will take us to that detail page that I referenced. And all the projects and problems in the system have a page like this, which is the place right now where we can show all the information that we have about that feature. So it's got the name up here. It's got the type of project, the location, whether it's active or not, if we have cost data associated with it. This is actually a photo carousel, so you can upload photos that are associated to that project. And then if we have like 5 photos of that project, it'll cycle through these, and it'll use that photo as the cover image on your card as well. Some other information about if we have a project manager assigned to it, our internal project number, if that project is related to a problem in our system, that would show up here. If we have vendors assigned to that project, they'll show up here. If that project is related to components from our master plan, that'll show up here. And then there's a map of that project location. And in the future, we're going to have kind of social functionality associated with this. This is just a placeholder to show you kind of what it's going to look like. But there will be the ability to add team members amongst different jurisdictions, different organizations, and us, and then have conversation is basically about that project on this page with those team members. And then you can export this detail page as a PDF, which is handy if you want to send it to a council person, for instance, or another staff member, and you can copy the link to this page and paste it to someone, and they can access it without having to log in to Confluence, which is really good for sharing information about your projects. And you can get to those detail pages as well by clicking on any of these cards over here, looking for one that has some components associated with it and a dollar value. So this one, for example, you can see, oh, it's not coming up, but it should. There's a few things that we're tweaking at the last minute, but it will show you the list of those. I think it said 40 some odd projects or components that are associated with this project. And any feature that you want to explore on the map, you just click on it and you'll get those pop-ups, which is really handy. So just a couple more high-level things. This in the upper left-hand corner, this little green stack of paper button is the layer manager. So this is going to come in handy to turn on and off any of the layers of data that are provided in the map. So just kind of like a GIS platform. There's features like this area-based mask, which uses this drop-down over here and masks off everything else, so that if you're just interested in working in Sand Creek, for instance, you can see that, but you can also do this for your jurisdiction, which is handy. And then all of the other data layers you can turn on and off on here. So the problems and projects are turned on by default, those yellow project lines and those red problem boundaries. And our other data layers that may be helpful for the work requests, like problem parts, which show up in orange, and components, which Holly mentioned, show up in green. Those are turned off by default, so because they kind of clutter the map a little bit, but you can turn them on when you want to look at those. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that we encourage you to look at as well, like MEP projects are on here, routine maintenance areas are on here, the NRCS soils data is available through here, the watersheds layer, which shows all the major and sub-watershed delineations, the floodplains, active lomax, effective reaches, stream management corridors, and then, of course, things like the service areas, counties, municipalities, et cetera. So a lot of really useful information that we'd encourage you to look at. And if you have questions about what any of these things are, there's little info icons with the eye with a circle around it next to each one of these. And when you hover over it, it just gives you a quick description of what that layer is. And then this little picture shows you what that layer typically looks like on the map. It's kind of like a mini legend. Just the last couple of things in terms of the interface, you can search for streams as well as an address. Think of this as like a Google search plus streams. So if you wanted to actually look for a stream like Big Dry Creek in Adams County, you can get to it easily through the search, as well as an address pin or a location or anything else that you want to search for. And then on the right-hand side, if you search over here, you're actually searching these problem and project cards. So it'll return, if you're looking for a specific project or problem, search for it in this box. And then the last thing I'll mention about this is that by default, this little box on the upper right-hand corner with the green checkbox that says Apply Map View to Filters, by default, this box is checked, which means that you're only going to see cards that are in your map view because there's a lot of problems and projects in the system. But right now, I'm only seeing 6 problems because those are the ones that are visible on my map right now. If I turn that off, then it will show you a card for every problem in the system. So you can see that number change to 728. And then if I go over to projects, it's returning 165 because of the fact that I've got these filters applied. If I cleared these, we'd probably see quite a few more projects pop on. That's the high-level overview of kind of how you navigate Confluence. There's other cool features that we can go into more detail about later. There's a measurement tool in the upper right where you can measure lines and areas. There's a map notes feature in the bottom left, this little notepad icon, where you can make notes to yourself and pin them on the map and give them a description and a color and put them in folders. So I make like a folder for a watershed, and if I'm reading a study or something about that watershed, I can make notes that are specific to that watershed that only I can see, which is also something that's helpful when you're doing your work requests. And then just the last thing I'll point out here is that our imagery service is Nearmap, and you can see the date of the most recent aerial that we're showing at the bottom of the screen here. So this says Nearmap May 27th, 2022. So that means that the imagery you're seeing is current as of May 27th of this year. And it's updated every 4 months, I believe. So you can get really good time series and seasonal data, and it's really handy for seeing, what's going on the ground, not in real time, but pretty close to it for an aerial, and it's super high resolution. And we think that's a really strong feature of this platform, that you can get in and see imagery that's current within, a 4-month span. So we encourage you to come in and play around with Confluence just for that, even.
Do you have access to past data through Confluence?
Not through Confluence, at least not yet. Right now, you can only see the most current imagery. We do have access to the historic imagery, which I think in the Denver metro area goes back, what is it, Katie, 5 years or 6 years or something like that. So if you're interested in seeing that, work with your watershed manager, and we can help you out with that. But Confluence only exposes the most recent imagery.
Thank you.
Yep, that's a great question. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Katie. She's going to touch on a few things that I probably forgot. There's some user management stuff up here in the upper right-hand corner. There's a My Confluence page over here on the upper left with the house, which is if you favorite a project or a problem by clicking on the little heart, it'll show up in your My Confluence page. So it's just a page to show you your favorites and some info about yourself. But Katie's going to dive deeper into the actual work requests, which is the focus of what we're here to talk about. And that's the third button on the left-hand side, the chat bubble with the little tools inside. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Katie take over. And while she's pulling that up, if there's any other questions, please feel free to share.
And by the way, we have Nearmap goes back to 2014. Okay, so it looks like there's no other questions, so I'll just go ahead and dive into creating projects. Like John mentioned, there's a few other user profile controls that you can access from your profile setting in the top right corner. If one important one to note in the My Profile settings that you can change is your default map zoom area. And after you sign up, it's going to reflect the organization that you selected, but you have the ability to change that here, and that can include the county, the district, or even our MHFD service area. And the default zoom area is represented here in the top drop down on this card panel on the right. So this, while there's a default setting, you can also select different areas and it'll zoom you there. So just want to point that out. And that's a little bit different than the functionality you'll see over in the work request module, which I'll just go ahead and jump over to. So from the left navigational panel, you can click on work request, and that'll switch you over to the work request module. You'll see a larger expanded panel on the right, and there's a board for each of the 5 project types that Holly went over that you can request funding from MHFD for. And then at the top, you'll see the organization that you signed up for. If, for whatever reason, that is not reflecting the correct organization, just let us know. We'll have to investigate. But this is not something that you can change like you could in the drop-down zoom. And then when you first switch over to the module, it'll be set to year 2023, since that's the work plan year that we are creating and submitting work requests or projects for. And then we have the same icons that you saw on the project detail page where you can share your work request board or download it. You have the ability to view some summary stats about the projects that you're requesting, and then here the clipboard will dive into that in a little bit more detail later, but that is where you're actually going to submit your work request. So I'm just going to walk through creating each project type and discuss, some of the differences between each project type. But to start, you can click in your workspace to create a project, and then you'll get this pop over asking you what type of project you want to create. Depending on the board that you had selected when you hit that create project button, that project type will be selected automatically. So I was on the Capital work request board. So when I hit create project, you can see that the Capital project type is selected here, and it is required that you name your project before you can move on from this screen. So following the convention that Holly went over, we try to name our projects with the stream name that the project is on, and then a location. And you can change this later, since that might, your location might change a little bit as you refine your project area. And then you're brought to the create project form. This is where you'll be creating your project geometry and filling out required attributes. You can see at the top, this is the name that you entered. You can edit your name here, from this form. There's a tag on the type of project, and then a little bit further description, a more detailed description of the project type in case you have any question on requirements for a particular project type or what that means. And then anywhere you see a little info icon, you can hover and there'll be help text. And then all required fields have the red asterisk by them, so you won't be able to save your project until all the required fields are filled out. So we request a detailed description of the project. And then the next section is where you can select components. And so the components are in green here. Oh, and I'll just touch on a few things here in the map. So we just have kind of some simplified tools here than the other map view, but you still have the ability to search for an address or one of our streams. You have the layer manager where you can toggle layers on and off. So you can look at those problems again that we walked through and the problem parts. Just noticing there's a double S there. And another helpful layer is the guidelines, and that's really helpful. It'll kind of just really highlight the jurisdiction, your jurisdiction, so you can easily tell if you're drawing your project within your boundary. I'm going to go ahead and turn those off for now. And so the components are in green, and again, those are the master plan improvements or the proposed solutions to the problem data set that we've been developing. So you can see here, there's a problem and some proposed components. So I can go ahead and choose to select this component, and you'll get a little selection tool here. And then you can see the resulting selection will show up in the component list on your project form. And you can see if you're selecting components that are, related to a particular problem boundary, that problem, it'll be grouped under that problem name. You can see the one I selected would help solve this lack of capacity problem along Kenny's Run. And just some basic information about the component will be listed here, the status and the cost. And so this cost reflects the cost from at the time of the master plan. So that's something to keep in mind. And then I'll also note that when you hover over the component in the list, it'll also highlight on the map so you can easily identify that feature. And then you have the ability to click and you'll get the pop-up with a little bit more information, so I can see that it's from this 1983 Master Drainage Plan study. From the pop-up, you can also remove this from your project selection, or you can also hit the little trash can button to clear out your component selection. And then you'll see here this independent component, and that's really because selecting components is a requirement for capital projects, then you can just add a line item. And so, this could be a generic improvement. And then you can provide your best estimate on the cost. And so I'll stop there and turn it over to John to add anything else about components or that I might have missed.
Thanks, Katie. I think the only other thing to note on the creation of capital projects, which right now are the only ones that use components, I believe, I don't know if restoration projects do or not, but capital projects are the ones that require you to put in components. Some of these master plans, as you guys know, are really old. The one that we just looked at here was from 1983, I think. The components that were shown in that master plan may or may not be still relevant. We've tried to update them as much as possible while still retaining that original intent of what the component was. But that's really how to think about the components data set and the problems data set and this create project process, is that you're trying to come up with, and really the components are there to help you understand what the master plan conveyed, as well as to come up with those costs, right? So as long as you're doing something that meets the intent of what that component showed, generally speaking, then you should include that component in your project, because that's what indicates to us that you are doing something that addresses what that master plan recommended, even if the actual implementation turns out to be something different, which we know is often the case. It's not always that we're going to build exactly what somebody put in a planning study from 40 years ago. So take these components with a little bit of a grain of salt, but do try to include them when you feel like you are doing something that addresses the intent of that component. And then, like Katie said, if there's not a component in the system or not a problem in the system that is in the area where you want to request a project, use that independent component. And it's not a spatial feature. You're not drawing it on the map. You're just saying, I'm going to build a crossing improvement. And you'll see in the next step where you select your project geometry that you can indicate the length of the reach where you want to do work. And similarly with the components feature, some of the stream improvement components, for instance, are really long because that's just how they were drawn in the master plan. But you might not want to implement that entire reach improvement with your project. Go ahead and still select that component so that we know that your project is related to that component. And then when you draw your project geometry in the next step, you'll be able to indicate the exact reach of stream where you want to do work. So it doesn't have to match up one-to-one with the components. It's just to give you a baseline, something to go on, and to help indicate to us that you're helping to meet that intent from the original master plan.
Hey, John.
Yep.
So are those costs taken directly from the master plans, or are they so folks understand what they're looking at?
Yeah, great question. Right now, the costs are exactly, and they're not always going to match up line item to line item in the concept design and the master plan, because we've combined some of them for simplicity, but the dollar values are taken from the master plan directly. So in the case of this 1983 study, the study will show a price of $18,100 for this storm drain. So that's essentially $1983. In the future, for next year, our intention is to either escalate those costs with an inflation factor or some kind of cost index, or redo the pricing structure entirely, where we have like a linear foot cost for stream improvements and storm drain, for instance, in different contexts, and then apply that. But right now, for this first iteration, we just tried to keep it exactly consistent with what's shown in the master plan, and then we can work with our partners to figure out their preferred approach to escalating those costs in the future. But that's definitely something to be aware of. And for a project like this, if you build this project in this area to address this problem and the costs just look crazy low because they're 40 years old, there's a place, in addition to this independent component, there's a place down below where you can put in additional cost and say, I think, gut check, or maybe you have another cost estimate or whatever, and you just want the numbers to match. This is a place where you can add any dollar value on top of what the system calculates, and then that will be added to your total cost for the project. So if you're like, I've done a bunch of these type of projects, I know this is going to be a $2 million job, put $2 million in there, or whatever the difference is between $2 million and the subtotal, just to get to that. So it's really just a worksheet kind of to help you come up with an accurate project cost. So if you think you have better information to go on, go with that. That would be my recommendation at this stage. All right, Katie, back to you for the project limits.
All right, thank you. So after we've selected our components, the next question is, next question is to create your project geometry. So you'll do that just like you did to select the component. You click in this box, and then right now it's kind of not a good example because I only have one component selected, but when you hit create project geometry, all the components that you have selected will highlight in your map so you can easily see the full extent of those components. And then you'll just click to draw the bounding extent. And so your project will automatically trace along the stream. There we go. So you don't have to follow the limits of the components exactly. So if the components you had selected are actually, a larger area than you wanted to do your project, or vice versa, you have that flexibility. So then you can also, if you don't get it right the first time, you can click and redraw, and it will update your project extent until you're happy with it. And then just touching on the financial section, we went over a little bit already, but there's a breakdown of potential overhead costs to add to your total estimate. And there's some default percentages for each of these categories set by default, but you have the ability to make adjustments. So you can, if one, cost will be higher or lower, you can make that change. And then there's a description box at the end where if you do make a change, you can, add a note of why. And then again, like John mentioned, if there's any other known costs for the project that you're aware of, you have the ability to add a description and a cost here as well. The next section is location information. So, and that gets auto-populated. You'll see it's already filled out for me once you actually create your project geometry. So it just does a quick intersect and populates the MHFD service area the project's in, as well as the county and jurisdiction. And then we have the sponsor field. So that should automatically be populated based on your user role, the organization that you signed up with. And then there's also a box for co-sponsor. So if there's going to be another project partner involved, you can add that as well. And then lastly, there's two sections for uploading images and documents. We're still working through some final updates to this, so it's not quite working at this time, but it will be in a few, I think this week So we'll send an update when that functionality is enabled for you to play around with. But that's something you'll be able to test before the actual request letter is sent out. And with that, I think I'm ready to save my project. It'll just be, there'll be a little pop-up that says, hey, this project's going to be added to Golden's work request board, and it'll be added to the Jefferson County Capital Work Plan for your MHFD manager to review. I'll just hit submit my project, and then you'll see it show up here in my workspace column. And that's because the workspace column is where all newly created projects are going to show up for you. There's a kind of a condensed card view representing each project that you create, and all draft projects created by, if your organization has multiple users creating projects, then you'll be able to see everyone from your team's, every project that is created by your team in this workspace column as a draft project. And then on the map, you can see the project here is in orange, which matches the little status tag in the bottom right of your project card. Each card has a little 3-dot menu in the top right corner where you have other options. If you want to delete your draft project, you can do that. You can zoom to it, and then edit project, that'll just pop up that same project form that we were on before, so you can make changes up to the point where you, up until you submit your work request board. After your project shows up in the draft workspace, the next thing you'll want to do to actually get it onto your work request board is select edit the amount. And then for capital projects and any project that we're planning for 5 future years, you'll get this pop over where you can actually enter the amount of dollars from MHFD that you are requesting. So just to point out that our estimated total project cost is displaying here on this card, and that is not, your 50% match. That is the true total estimated project cost. And so what we're asking in these in the year amounts is just the funding requested from MHFD. And so now that I've entered an amount, you can see that the projects are showing up in the right column, and the card is actually split into 2 to reflect the multiple years of funding. And then you also have the ability just to drag cards directly into the column that you would like and edit the amount after you drag it into the right column. And then you also have the ability to reorder your cards. And so the order that you have your project cards stacked reflects your priority. So you can see I have a green and a yellow on the left side of my card. So any project in green is the top priority, yellow is your middle priority, and then I'll just quickly create another project here. And then your third priority project will be in red. And again, you have the ability to move those around until you're happy with the priority.
Katie, can I chime in real quick on that priority thing? This is important for the work request because, especially in maintenance, it's important for capital too. We try to fund all the capital requests that we can, but for all these programs, the local or your watershed manager is going to see basically each jurisdiction in each project type gets a top priority, a second priority, and a third priority. So we're going to see that Golden has a capital project that's green, a capital project that's yellow, and a capital project that is red. And similarly for all the other jurisdictions that we work with, we're going to see those top three priorities of theirs. So when we're going through and making the work plan, our intent is to fund everyone's top priority as much as possible. So we're going to put all the green projects at the top, fund those first. Then we're going to fund the yellow projects. Then we're going to fund the red projects. Every other project that you add will have a gray flag, which indicates that it wasn't one of your top three priorities. So just keep that in mind when you're building your work request, that ordering, dragging these cards around and ordering them in the column is really important. Make sure that they have the right color flag, because we will plan on funding your green projects before anything else.
To answer the question in the chat, do you have to fill out requested dollar value to move it into a year? You don't. So you can drag cards directly into the year column without actually entering an amount, but it is good to remember to go in and do that eventually, even if it's already in the column that you would like to request funding for.
And for the second part of your question, Colin, should the total request over the work plan equal the total project cost? No, not necessarily. And also, this is just reflecting the dollars that are being requested from MHFD. So for a capital project, it's not going to reflect more than half of the total project cost, because the local government has to come up with the other half at least. But there could be projects that aren't fully funded through the work plan. Maybe you have other sources of funding to fund a large project. That's common, right? Or you might fund a project over more than 5 years. So the estimated project cost is just to give you a data point to help keep in mind how much money you need to eventually have to get your project built. But there's no enforced relationship between how much money you're requesting and how much you think your project is going to cost. Just depends on how quickly you want to get it built and how many other sources of funding you have.
And here at the bottom, you'll see a summary total. I wasn't sure which total cost we were talking about there, but again, we're going to update this label so it is a little bit more clear that this is just a roll-up of the MHFD funds that you're requesting for all the projects within each column. And then when you can expand this, and if you are requesting projects in multiple counties, you'll see a breakdown of the cost in each county. And then if you have a budget that you're working against, you have the ability to enter a target cost amount. And then it'll also show your difference there, so how much money you have left to work with to meet that as you're building your budget. And then just in the chat, just touching on the question about will the past or the existing work plans be available or be visible in this system, and they will. So for capital and study, you'll see on your 2023 board all approved or active projects that are on this year's current work plan. Maintenance and the other projects that are kind of done on a more yearly basis, they'll still be in the system, but you'll just have to toggle back to last year's work plan to see those projects.
And maybe real quick, we can touch on Pam's question from earlier. She said, Holly mentioned that the past unfulfilled projects are not loaded. Is that for the test only? So when we're referring to the past unfulfilled projects, we're referring to if you've gone into the ArcGIS Online web application in the past, like the past 2 or 3 years that we've used that, maybe a little bit more actually, and then submitted a project request and then it was not put onto the work plan. That project is just kind of still floating out there. Those projects will not be shown in the system. We're not migrating those over from the ArcGIS Online environment. So the only projects that you're going to see are the ones that Katie was just talking about with respect to Morgan's question, that you're going to see projects that have been approved on a work plan, on last year's work plan. So they won't all have begun work yet. They might be in future years. They might not be initiated. You might not even have resolutions for them. But if they're on the work plan, you'll see them. If they were requested in the past and they were denied and they were not on the current work plan, and you want to re-request those, you'll have to put them into the system. Again, you'll have to create that project and request it inside of Confluence. Jacob asked, how do we represent projects that span multiple years, DCM? So if you go to one of these project dots and then enter that funding in multiple years in that pop-up, then that project will get split across those years and you'll see the funding requested for each of those years. Looks like it might be glitching out on her a little bit, but in one of the examples, this West Fort Kenny's Run, she put in $1 million for 2024 and some other amount of money for 2025. So you can see that card with the same project title is in both years. That's reflecting that you've requested funding for the same project in 2 years. And if you go to edit that project from either one of those cards, it'll take you back to that project you see on the map there for West Fork Kenny's Run at Cottonwood Circle. So now you see 3 cards for the same project, one in 24, one in 25, one in 26, and the funding for each of those years. Yep, no problem. Good questions. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, I think I'll switch over and walk through the rest of the project types. So as we kind of go through each of these, you'll see some similar sections of the Create Project form. And so with each one, there's just a few subtle differences. So just want to highlight those. So I'll switch over to the study work request board. Select Create Project. And here, we're asking the reason that you would like to request a new study. So there's a drop down with a few common reasons why someone might want to request a study. It's not previously studied. The flood hazard mapping is outdated. The master plan recommendations are outdated. And then if you select that one, you'll get a follow-up question on, why the master plan recommendations are outdated. Were there changed watershed conditions? And then you can see they're kind of getting cut off here, but if you hover over, you can see the full text. And then also you have other, and then you're given a text box to enter another reason for requesting a study. And then you can add a detailed description of the study. And this is where I would make note if you want to include a FAD study or any other, special type of study requirement, you can leave a note here. And then you'll select your stream instead of selecting components. Here you'll same functionality, but you'll just select a stream that you would like to study. And when you do that, it won't select just that little extent that I did. It'll actually go in and select the whole stream. And then we have a little statistic or a stat table here, or a summary table of the stream that I selected, and then the length of that stream within all the intersecting jurisdictions. And that's really to give you and MHFD staff a better idea of who all would be impacted by this study, and to see if there's any, possibilities to include other partners in the study. And so it just gives a little breakdown of each of the streams. So you can see I selected Lena Gulch and, a little unnamed stream. But that's kind of why we built out that functionality. And then again, the location information is automatically populated in addition to the sponsor and then you'll have the ability to upload documents. So really pretty simple study request form. John, is there anything you want to add on about the studies?
I don't think so, other than just kind of at a higher level, we encourage people to request studies that are meaningful to you. We're trying to do studies a little bit differently at the flood district and not just, kind of cycle through H&H studies, but try and do, maybe it's a stream management corridor or a flood hazard zone that you want to look at, or maybe you want to do a stream assessment on your reach, or maybe you want to do a baseline condition assessment. We're going to kind of make those things a little clearer in the future, that what you can request, but we're interested in doing studies that are meaningful to people. And similarly, if you request what you want is what I'm trying to say, even if it's not historically what we would have done. And then, you're not obliged to request studies every year either. If you don't really want updated hydrology or hydraulics for a specific reason for any of your watersheds, you don't have to request anything. You're not missing out on funding necessarily by not requesting a study. So just make sure you're requesting stuff that you're interested in for a reason, and let us know what that reason is. That's really what the point of the description and the reason for study drop downs are here. And Morgan asked in the chat, is that for a study or a special project? This is just for studies. There's a separate request for special projects.
Oh, sorry, John, to clarify, the things you mentioned, like the stream assessment and fluvial hazard zone, is that a study or is that special project request? Oh,
I think I would, if it's something that's on a reach of stream, and you're actually studying that stream in some sort of way, like we just talked about, I would call those studies. And if it's something that's like a criteria update or a research project or something that's kind of non-location specific, I would call that a special project.
So we can do special projects that are location specific and a study if it's kind of outside of the ordinary or the typical MDP, OSP. If it's something kind of new, you could also put it in special projects, and we can see there's some advantages there because there's some advantages there from how it's funded. Thanks for asking that question, Morgan.
And similarly for studies, if you have questions about that, reach out to your watershed manager or to Brooke Seymour. And definitely all of the historic H&H studies and FADs are going to be considered studies. And we'll work with you to find out basically the best way to fund, whatever else it is that you want to do. My main point is just that we can do more than just H&H studies, and we encourage you guys to, think outside the box a little bit about what you might want to get out of these studies, and don't be afraid to ask us.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out, again, in the layer manager, toggling on helpful layers. We're kind of working through which layers are most helpful for each project type. But, in this case, I can turn on our project layer, and it'll show a representation of, ongoing studies that MHFD is doing right now. So I think that could be, something helpful to check out, maybe our floodplain layers too. But you can see here our studies, the little dashed lines on either side of the stream. You can see the different colors. And so one is to represent an ongoing FAD study, and then the other is for a master planning study. So in the area I selected, there's actually, ongoing studies, but, if I'm requesting a fluvial hazard study or stream assessment, it still might be a good request. So I just wanted to point that out. And so again, I'm going to save my draft project. The prompt telling me which board my project is going to will pop up, and then my draft project will show up in my workspace. And just like I did for capital, I can enter the amount. And again, this is just for the funds requested from MHFD. And then I'll move it to the right column. Any other questions on studies or anything else to add? Okay, well, I will jump right into maintenance requests. Here, the board for maintenance projects looks a little bit different. Instead of the 5 years, you'll see each column represents the 5 different maintenance subtypes that you can request. Since we kind of set up our maintenance work plans just on an annual basis. Starting off with layers that will be on by default and will help in your maintenance project requests. We have the existing areas that are in our routine maintenance program in purple here. And again, you can click to get the pop-up to see more information about that routine maintenance area. And then we also have our maintenance eligibility projects. Oops. Here they're kind of in the tannish color. So you can check if there's a maintenance or MEP project in your area and the status. So if it's final acceptance, that would be a valid maintenance request. Okay, so again, just going to hit that create project, enter a name, and then choose your subtype. And so no matter which subtype you select, your create project form will be the same. It's consistent between all maintenance project types. So you'll enter your detailed description. And then here in this section, you're requested the frequency, and that is just for routine maintenance requests. Well, I don't know if that's true, but there could be other types of, like maybe sediment removal that you might want to do more than once a year.
Typically you're going to use that. Typically you're going to use that for a routine request if it's something that you want to have done on a frequency. But if it's specifically sediment removal, would be the other category, where if you think you might want to have sediment removal done more than once a year, probably not likely. But if you did, you can indicate that here. Most projects that are not routine maintenance, you're just going to select none or one on this frequency to indicate that it's just a one-time project.
Right. And so I selected a restoration project type, so I'm just going to enter none as my frequency. There's a toggle to indicate whether that property you have public access or ownership to, and then the maintenance eligibility status. So kind of touched on using the MEP layers to help determine that maintenance eligibility. We also have capital projects on by default, or if you're unsure, you can say unknown. But just trying to get a sense of the maintenance eligibility status of your project request. You will draw activity, and really that's just drawing the project geometry. So just like we did before, you select your section of stream, and then your location information will be populated. And yeah, that's it. Really no other differences between the other project types. And just wanted to say that, depending on where you draw your project, when you're doing creating your project geometry, you might actually you see here, I made my selection and grabbed this other little section of stream. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We can refine these project extents throughout the project's life cycle. So don't be too worried about that. So just wanted to point that out. Anything else, John, to add about maintenance projects?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'll add that once we have the picture uploader functioning, which should be before you guys get in here to do your final, maybe not in the test version, but in the final version, you'll be able to. Those pictures are really helpful, especially on maintenance projects. You know, it's one thing to know where the stream is and have a description, but having a picture of what you're seeing, you know, that lets us know, it just gives us a lot better context for what the request is. So I'd encourage you to upload photos whenever you can, especially with your maintenance requests.
And yeah, so then the next step again would be to request funding. And then kind of different than the other project types. So as soon as I enter funding for 2023, and you'll see it in the pop-up for maintenance 2024 and 2025, that's just really a tool that might be helpful for MHFD managers to get a sense of the duration of the maintenance project. I think that's because we're kind of seeing that as a trend for kind of longer term, you know, maybe larger restoration projects that actually span multiple years. But I guess the most important is to request the amount from MHFD in 2023, and once I hit save, it will automatically jump over to the correct maintenance project subtype column. Any questions about that? So for, will the current maintenance program locations be preloaded? So for routine maintenance, you'll be able to see those. That's in our layer manager for routine maintenance, and that's all areas, for trash and debris and vegetation management that are on our routine contracts today. And then our current maintenance work plan will be available by toggling back to the previous year. So you'll be able to see current work that's going on this year. Okay, switching over to acquisition. Until enter, my description, and then if there's some 2 questions about the progress of an acquisition project and the anticipated purchase date, that's really only applicable if this happens to be a property that's kind of already underway or has some momentum behind it. Asking about the appraisal process and, if there's funding secured already. I think that would just be an indication of how quickly or ready you are to acquire this piece of property. But if it's not yet underway, you can just leave that blank for now. And then for acquisition and also special projects, we're just adding a point location on a map near or on the property of interest. And then, same sections like normal. The location will get auto-populated, and you'll have the ability to upload attachments. And I'll move it to my requested year and add the dollar amount requested from MHFD. And then just to reiterate what Holly mentioned earlier, our floodplain acquisition program or preservation program is, I think, separate from land acquisition that might be required for a capital project. So just wanted to point out that distinction again. Any questions about acquisition projects or anything else to add from the team? All right, well, moving on to our last project type. And this is really just to fulfill any other type of project that you might want to work with MHFD on. Yes, and again, just a reminder to be descriptive with the name. I'm kind of just doing some generic test names here. And then, details on your special project request. And yeah, just if there's any questions on the type of special projects, you can reach out to Holly as well. And so you do have the ability to add a point, or actually it's required for you to add a point on the map for special projects, but you may be wondering, what do I do if my special project isn't really tied to a specific location? And in that case, we just ask, maybe just drop a point maybe in the center of your city, or on your office building, or on MHFD's office building, but it is still a requirement, so that these projects work with kind of the rest of our back-end architecture to have a point location. And then just the standard location and document attachment. Questions? Some funding. And that should be it. Oh, and your watershed manager. Yes, thank you, Holly. All right, any questions on that? All right, well, I will now now that we've entered in all our projects for all our different project types, you can work with, you might be the only one requesting projects from your organization, but you might be working with multiple people. And, we just encourage, to have one person to review all the requests and actually submit your request to MHFD staff. And that's where you would be doing, in the top right corner, you can access your overall work request status. From this first icon here, the little clipboard. And so, lost my balance there. If you, in order to submit your requests, we are requiring a review step. So you can see here, all of the project types have this little yellow dot here, and that yellow dot means that they have not been marked as reviewed. And so once you finalize your request, you can go in and check that they've been reviewed, and you can leave a note about that. So now you can see that my status has been updated. And when I go back, you can see that those two boards that have already been marked as reviewed are highlighted in green. And so I just want to make sure it's a requirement that all of them are reviewed before I can submit. So I'll go in and check those. And now you can see there's an overall work request status. So once I select it to approved and hit save, that's when I'm actually submitting my work request board to MHFD staff. John, is there anything you want to elaborate on about the review process or updating your status?
No, I think you covered how it works. This is just to reiterate what you said, this is a place for your staff to manage your internal workflow for putting together and submitting your work request. And we understand that, and the reason is some jurisdictions have maybe 5 people that are working on the work request. You might have someone for capital, someone for study, and a person for each of these types. Other jurisdictions might have one person that's submitting all of them, but you have a shared workspace, and the way that the user system is set up in Confluence is that all of the users from a certain jurisdiction have equal rights as all the other users. There's no administrative user for a local jurisdiction. So anybody at your jurisdiction who's signed up for Confluence can go in and check these boxes off and say that these individual project types have been reviewed, and they can also submit your work requests. So you need to coordinate internally and decide who is going to be the point person that's actually going to change that top box from under review to approved and hit save. They will not be able to do that. Nobody will. And like Katie said, until you have done that same, you check the box for each of these 5 project types and all of those lights have turned from yellow to green. That's just a way for you to track internally amongst your team which work plans are ready to be submitted and which ones are not. And then someone has to then go in and approve that board, and then that's what submits the work request to us. So that's what this section, the status section, is for, is to enable you to do that, but make sure that you're coordinating internally and that, no one person is just going rogue and checking all these off and submitting the work request while other people are still working. So bit of a word of caution about that.
Yeah, and just to kind of show what that looks like. So here I changed my overall work request board status to approve, thinking that I'm ready to submit. I hit save, and then I get this little error message essentially saying that it's unavailable until they're all selected as for approval or that they've been reviewed. So I'll go ahead and check that study has been reviewed and hit saved. And then it'll say, give me this warning that by approving, you are actually submitting your work request to MHFD. I'll go ahead and hit approve. And so now I've actually submitted my work request to MHFD, and I believe you'll get an email notification letting you know that your work request has been submitted, and your MHFD watershed manager will also get a notification saying that you've submitted your request. And so when I go back and look at my board now, you can see that my status has changed from draft to requested, and I no longer have the ability to edit any of the amounts since, don't want to make changes while they're being reviewed. And yeah, I guess that's the whole process. And so just a few comments on the chat about the recording. We'll be sure to send this recording out so you have access to it. And then we're also available for any questions throughout this testing process, or even when you're doing the request for after we release the production version. I'm going to try to set up some standing kind of office hours on my calendar in case you have any trouble with the system or creating projects. And then your watershed managers are also a great resource.
You also understand it might take a little time to get in and play around with things, so just even know what to ask. You'll run into stumbling blocks as you're trying things potentially, and then you can, like Katie said, we'll be available with some standing office hours. And then at any point, anytime, reach out to your watershed manager with any kind of questions you have about the process. And we encourage you to do that early. You have a month for the work request, but I would not recommend going into the system the day before they're due and trying to figure out how to, go through this process a month from now. I know how life happens sometimes, but I would still encourage you to try and get in there and play around with the system early and often, just to make it easier for yourself. Yeah, I think that's most of what you should need to know. And we anticipate having a lot of questions over this next month. So please, don't be shy. We're here to help. And we hope this is an improvement over how things have been done in the past. We know it's going to take a little while to, really kind of massage everything. This is all brand new data and brand new system, but we're excited to have you guys help us, make it a great tool.
That reminds me of one thing that we did not, I don't think we covered it, but I just want to mention that while we sent you to the test environment to practice making projects, that the problem data, the components, the problem parts, the project, that's all, real data. So it would be still a good opportunity to get in the system and explore. And then, we're just really looking for feedback. Could be any, functionality, that is not working quite right for you, or you have a question on. We have in the left panel a little feedback form, so you can click on this and fill out a form to submit feedback to us, and we'll be monitoring that, and would appreciate it.
One last quick point that I just remembered that we didn't really make is that when you're creating draft projects, you can create as many draft projects as you want, and that means even if it's 5 different versions of the same project, if you're just playing around with configurations of different components or whatever, or if 2 people are making different copies of the same project, that's fine. That workspace is for you. We can see the projects in there, and we can move them around if you ask us to. If like someone's out of town, and you need to get the request submitted, or if you need some help, we can go in and help you with that. Just want you to know that we can see what you're doing as MHFD staff, but other jurisdictions will not be able to see your projects, and you can create as many drafts as you want and then just drag over that final project that you want to request. And the rest of the stuff can just remain in your workspace, and we'll help you clean it up later. So feel free to use that workspace in your draft projects to help you really hone in on what the right request is for your jurisdiction.
And that just made me think of one more thing. I don't mean to keep adding on, but your draft projects will stay in that workspace. So there's some that you may not, actually submit on your work request board. Those will, persist in the system, and any project that you request that does not get added to the work plan, you will still see that project back in your draft workspace. So you won't ever lose anything until you actually go in and delete it.
Yeah, and Teresa asked a question of me earlier, and this is for you, Katie. Is the ArcGIS Online web map still going to be accessible to people if they wanted to go back and look at those unfulfilled project requests, even though they're not going to be in Confluence? You can still have access to go in and look at them in the old system.
Yeah.
So we could provide that link as well, potentially, or, if people want to. We don't want to confuse folks that might just want to be able to start from scratch in the new system. But if you do want to go back and see your old requests that you've mapped in the old platform, we still have those available. So I'd say just reach out to your watershed manager if you need to see those, and we can, or if you know how to get back to the old system, they're still in there. Any other questions? Feedback, high fives, anything? All right. Well, thank you guys. We appreciate your time. Paul, you had your hand up, or is that a high five? Good. Nice. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, thank you all. We look forward to working with you over this next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.